opening quotation. Time begins now. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Forensics is hard. Impromptu is hard. But you know, we don't do this because it's easy. We do it because it's rewarding. And we get to suffer together. We get to endure this hardship together. And this idea of endurance brings us to today's quotation. At the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can. By Frida Kahlo, a Mexican painter. Now, when we think of this idea of needing to endure more than we think we can, I mean, the quotation's meaning is fairly straightforward. It's stating that even though things may seem hopeless at times, we can take a lot more than we think. And we're going to analyze this not from an idea of just how we can endure more. No, we're going to take a look at why we should try to endure more. Because suffering will ultimately provide us more meaning out of life. And we're going to analyze how this meaning comes about through two areas of analysis. First on a societal level, and then on an individual level. Now to start us off, let's take a look at how suffering can bring about greater social progress. We'll analyze this on a societal level. Now, first example here is the Black Lives Matter protest from the summer of 2020. Yes, many people would use a red herring argument against pro-racial justice policies by saying these riots are violent, etc., etc. But the protests were ultimately promoting good progress. And they wouldn't have come about if it hadn't been for Derek Chauvin murdering George Floyd. This is a terrible thing that happened. However, it did bring about very good things. It brought attention to the racial injustices in America. When we see bad things happen, like the death of George Floyd, we see good things come about because it inspires us to make a change. We can also see this through the examples of Karl Marx's theory of socioeconomic change. See, contrary to popular belief, Marx didn't see capitalism as an inherently bad thing. He saw it more as a necessary evil, because the people would see how the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy would be oppressing them, and only then would they be inspired to rise up and bring about a socialist societal haven. It is only through looking at oppression when we can be inspired to bring about good things. So this idea of social suffering is very necessary to bring about progress. This also goes more narrow than the broad scope of social progress, with suffering being necessary. We can also look at this on an individual level. We're going to look at this through the lens of the psychological theory known as dialectical behavioral therapy. Now, dialectical behavioral therapy is essentially a scientifically recognized and affirmed meditation. It's reflecting on your life, essentially. But how are we going to bring about more meaning in our life if we don't reflect on the things that we wish were different? If everything is going well, we humans, according to this theory, are typically stuck, stagnant, in just keeping things good because they're good. Why would we want to change them? But if we reflect on the things that are less good, we feel motivated to change them. That is what this theory, this dialectical behavioral therapy, entails. We need to suffer and reflect on what we want to be different if we're going to create some better meaning in our lives. Let's take an example of this to be a bit more specific. The protagonist of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, the main character's name is Pip. Now, Pip receives a very large sum of money from a mysterious benefactor, and upon receiving this, Pip becomes very snobbish towards his family and begins to push them away. However, as Pip goes on with his life, he begins to simply lose everything in a moment of very terrible loss. But where does Pip go? How does he respond to this? Sure, he feels sorry for himself a little bit, but he reflects on what he wished he had done differently. He wishes he had treated his family better. He goes back and shows love to them, and they forgive him. He receives more meaning because he reflected on how he suffered. After analyzing on a social and individual level why suffering is necessary for ultimate life meaning and human flourishing, we can see that today's quotation, at the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can, has a lot of merit. And in fact, we should try to endure more than we think we can, because ultimately, that is going to bring out the most meaning. Like these impromptu speeches.